So thank you for coming. I didn't expect that much people, honestly. So I'm glad to see that everyone is interested. So today we will talk about Storybook, and I will give you a quick comprehensive introduction in order to streamline your UI development process. So a bit about myself. My name is Florian, the co-founder and CTO of I'm the co-founder and CTO at Avanssion Inc. I'm born and raised in France. I spent 4 years in Japan, and I recently moved to South Korea 3 weeks ago. I've been working with development and design teams for more than 8 years, and you can contact me on florianldt.com or on most social media with the handle florianldt. So who is this for? It's for designers. So because we will use Figma and we will talk about design principles. It's for front-end developers. There will be code in React. It's also for team leaders and project managers because I will put the emphasis into collaboration a lot. And it's for everyone curious about both design and development and everything in between. So before starting, seeing a lot of you guys with the computer typing a little. So what I want to say is like every underlying text in this presentation, every images and demo have their link to the resources. This talk is recorded, so you will find the video later on. All material used is open source and will be provided, so you can check that later. Prepare your questions because we have a Q&A session at the end of the talk, and we have a lot of things to cover in a very short period of time, so bear with me, and most importantly, and hopefully, enjoy the talk. So this is today's agenda. So we will talk from A to Z, starting from what Storybook, preparing the design, then implementing the Storybook, deploying it, publishing your component library, integrating the component library, and along the way I will give a couple of best practices and tips for each steps. So first, what's Storybook? Here, nothing fancy. I'm just quoting what's written on the website because they do a very good job in introducing their own service. Storybook is a front-end workshop for building UI component and pages in isolations. So we will talk in depth throughout the following sections. Why should you care? So you should care because storybooks allow you to use a component-driven development approach. So isolating the UI from the business logic, allowing you to develop faster and better communicate between developers and designers. Storybooks allow you to have your component documentation all in one place. You have the ability to involve all the stakeholders as soon as possible. So designers, developers, PMs, everyone. It improves also testing. And as said before, you can really easily isolate UI from business logic, and for the business standpoint, it allows you to iterate on your product very quickly, and very important for businesses, save time and money. So preparing the design. So just a quick raise of hand here. Who is a designer or maybe do a bit of design? Okay, 2. Okay, nice. I've been doing the same exact talk yesterday in a room full of designers, so I'm seeing that it's the opposite today. So for you who are designers and maybe developers, you might know about the atomic design approach, the atomic design principle. For people who don't know about that, it has been introduced in 2013 by Mr. Brad Frost. It's a methodology for creating design components, design systems, and it has been originally composed of 5 different levels, but then throughout the years, a 6th level has been introduced. And if you want to know more about that, I'm putting the cover of the book that I totally recommend to read. So for regarding this atomic design approach, I'm here putting the 6 different levels that we will see in more detail. So first starting with the design tokens, moving up to atoms, moving up to molecules, then organisms, templates, and then pages. So it might be a little bit obscure for now, but the demo is here to explain. So first demo, we'll jump to Figma. So we have a very unique microphone stand here. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So moving to Figma, I want first to start to show you, starting with the last level, but in order to show you what we will be building today. So I'm taking as example a job board that is taken from a website that I simplified. The reason why I'm taking a job board here is because they are very appropriate for a component approach. You have a list of job items and so on, and it's fairly easy to do, so it's very interesting for this demo. So it will be available in both mobile and desktop. So if we jump quickly to the laptop version, you have first the header, some hero section on the top, couple of job lists, and a bigger one with an optional button in the end. So we will go through each level and explain how we put component and why we put them in that level in particular. So starting with design tokens. So design tokens are elements that by themselves don't make more sense, and the goal of those elements is to be used in the next levels. So this is where you will see all the colors, font sizes, breakpoints, some typographies. So we have here the colors. So as a designer, your job is to make every component as clear as possible. So here, putting the effort into putting the value, naming your component, which is very important. I know a lot of you guys here are developers, and naming things are our first problem. Yeah. So if the designer can do the job by naming each component and each state and so on, that's a lot of the work done. Moving to breakpoints. So here we have the different breakpoint used in this project. So we have 3 of them: the mobile and up, tablet and up, and laptop and up. So with, again, the values written. So as a developer, Figma is a tool for designers. So as developers, we might not know how to handle the product very well. So if we can avoid developers to drill down the view hierarchy as much as possible, so not clicking just to obtain what the size of this particular element is, that's that time saved. Because if you do this, it's a very quick action, like maybe 2-3 seconds. But if you have to do it for 100 components, then add up, that's a lot of time wasted. So we have here the breakpoints, the elevations. So if you over one element, the different shadow used. Moving to atoms. So atoms here are components that cannot be broken down even further. So here we got our typographies, a display, heading. So one neat thing here is you can see those red rectangles with opacity and also the pixel value. So this again is to inform the developers that you have invisible paddings. So it might be unclear if you don't have those red rectangles, you might have to click again, drill down the view hierarchy to find those paddings. But here it's clear, crystal, that you have top and bottom paddings. naming things again. So if you do this as a designer, your developers will love you very much. So labels, paragraphs, and so on. Moving to a component that pretty much every product has is button. So in this case, buttons are divided in 3 different sizes. We have the small version, the medium version, and the large version. Every version has the possibility to have 3 different shapes. So we have square buttons, rounded buttons with a slight border radius, and peels button. And if we take every shape, you have the possibility to see 3 different kinds: a primary kind, a secondary kind, and a ghost kind, with different states. Normal state, when you hover the button, when you press the button, when the button is disabled, and when it is loading. So in the introduction, before the talk, you have been presented with a nice storybook, and for example, I remember seeing the loading state. So this is how, in the design, how you demonstrate that you have this loading state. Moving to another atom that we are using, badges, 2 different kinds, 3 different shapes, thumbnail as well, a very simple logo. Then moving up to molecules. So molecules here are aggregation of multiple atoms. So here we have the header again with those red boxes to inform the developers of invisible paddings in order to save time again. Different breakpoint. So this is how the header will looks like on a breakpoint which is less than desktop and up. And starting from desktop and up, you have the laptop version. Something here that makes more sense as a molecule is the job list item. So an aggregation of the thumbnail, aggregation of 2 typographies, with also a badge here. And we also have 2 states, the normal state and the over state, and 3 different shape: squared, rounded, and peel. Moving up to organisms. So here organisms are sections of your design and or aggregations of multiple molecules. So here as a section, we have our hero section, here again with the guideline for the developers and some comment here. Something that is also more visible are the job list. So aggregation of 1 atom, a label, and aggregation with the molecules. So the job list items. We here have an optional bottom button that take the time to show the multiple variation, the multiple possibilities. And here again, the same version, but with the guidelines for your developers. And also available in 2 different breakpoints, small for mobile and for desktop and up. Moving to templates, we are almost done. Templates are a representation of the whole page using placeholders. So we see what we had on the pages, but here instead of having real data, we have placeholders for text and also placeholder for images. So you see the base structure, but everything uses placeholders. And then going back to what we started, the pages. So with the real data that your users might see at a point in time. So that's it for this section. So let me take back the mic. So best practices and tips for this for preparing the design. Don't forget, easy to forget, component states. For example, disabled, loading. How many times you have to go back and forth, talk to the designer because they are not showing. I always say that for every state, you have 2 or 3 other states, because the designers already, most of the time, they show you only when things go right, but They forget sometimes everything when it's loading, when it's, for example, the list when it's empty or when there is an error. So as a designer, don't forget. Document your design as much as possible. So using those red boxes, or you guys might have other tips for that. And everything is made to avoid the cognitive overhead for your developers. So avoiding going back and forth for pretty much meaningless things that it's very easy to solve right in the beginning. And involve stakeholders in your design process. So talk as a designer, talk to developers as soon as possible, even in the design process. And as a developer, don't be scared to talk to the designer directly and ask them how it is going. And especially for startups are known for iterating very quickly on the product. And talking to, like, having every stakeholders involved makes you reduce miscommunication and find potential problem right away. And for the designer developer communication, as a designer, you might think that something is easy to design because it's just a drag and drop, but it can be a very long time to implement. And so as the developers, how is this? Is it easy to do? Is there an easier way, a quicker way to do that? And as a startup, this is something very valuable. So now that we prepared the design, so developers, this is for you. It's time for the implementation. So here, the Storybook website is also doing a great job. So I don't have much more to say about the installation process, except that in order to install Storybook, you first have to create your project. Storybook is available for React, Angular, Vue, and more. And the reason why you have to create your project before installing Storybook is because when you run the command npx storybook init, the command will check which framework you are using, and depending on the framework you are using, the command will create all the necessary repository. It's one repository in that case, and the different config files. So after that, you just have, you're basically ready to start implementing your design component. So in order to see that in detail, let's move to the demo. Second demo of today. Works well. So first, before showing you the code, I want to show you how the Storybooks looks like when it's at the end. So I just here have a quick introduction. So it's basically reading what's in my README. So that's something you can find later in the repo that I'm giving. So here I decided to represent, to structure everything following the atomic design principles. So it's easy for you guys to go to the Figma, see the Figma file, and find the same thing on the Storybook. In real, you might not see this kind of folder structure. So here, moving to the tokens, the design tokens, we can see the breakpoints. We can also see the different colors. We can see the different elevations. Moving to the atoms, we have the badges with the different kind, primary, secondary, is it big enough? Primary, secondary, the buttons, so the primary buttons, the different sizes and different shapes, secondary, ghost, the loading state, the disable state, moving to the simple logo, moving to the thumbnail, different shape here again, square, rounded, circle, exactly as we've seen in the Figma file. Moving to the typographies, display, heading, label, paragraph, you get it? Moving to the molecules, the header, the job list items. So this is where we see things taking shape already. Different shape here, square, rounded, peel. Moving up to the organisms, so we have our hero section, our job list with different shapes, square, rounded, peel, odd, something that we didn't see on the Figma, but it's also important to visualize because maybe we didn't thought about when we receive in the data, when we receive an odd number of job, how we want this to be displayed. Maybe this is the common sense, but it might be something else that we are looking for. With the optional button, so talking about empty, the states that are easy to forget, the empty one. So if we receive no jobs, how are we displaying it? Then moving to the templates. So moving to the templates, as we've seen, we start to see the full page with the placeholders and the page with the real data. So going back to the primary button, I'm going to show you guys what's possible to do with Storybook and what Storybook give you for pretty much free. So here we are in the Canvas tab, moving to the doc. This is a nice one-page view of all your component, the different props that your component might have. You will probably add a lot more description, like the Storybook file we've seen in the introduction. Then if we go back to Canva, you have the possibility right into Storybook to test light mode and dark mode. In our case, I'm not taking care of that, but this is something that when implemented, you can directly test in Storybook. Something nice is you have the possibility to check your component into different viewport. In order to make more sense, I will go to the page where we know that we have different breakpoints. So here, if I toggle the iPhone 14 Plus, I can verify that my responsiveness is working as expected. So one column when we are in mobile, jumping to the iPad, we have then two columns. So everything is working as expected. Moving to the iPad, the MacBook here again, everything is behaving correctly. I have to zoom out. Okay. If we reset and going to, I will still keep that page, and something that Storybook is giving you for free is this kind of measurement. So this is nice to verify that everything, the measurement is as you expect. Something that is not given for free, but you just have to install one plugin. And so you've seen that I'm wearing glasses. So there is a cool trick where by just a click of a button, you can see how some people having like eyes problem might be able to see your website. So basically, if I take out my glasses, I don't need this plugin, but but you can see how people are using are viewing your product. It's also interesting, and you can see that how many percent of the population is has these kind of disabilities, and you have also same for some people see colors differently. So here you might see that this my design is using grayscale, so it doesn't impact a lot, but on some icons here you can see that the icon changes because some people see colors differently than your other person. So if I toggle here, I'm going back to the button. If I'm toggling the bottom panel, so what I like to do with Storybook is provide different stories. First, static ones, so with read-only values. So in the control tab, you can only see all the props, but in a read-only fashion, so you cannot interact with it. In the second tab, action tab, you will receive every action, so you don't have to right-click, inspect. Everything is nice and tidy in Storybook. Something that is pretty cool is you can also write in Storybook, check if you are not violating any accessibility rules. So in the case of the button, it's fine, but I know that if I move to the job list item, I'm seeing one violation, and the violation is about color contrast. So I know that this label here, I might have to change the color because it might be, the contrast might not be good for certain type of people. So this is cool that you can see everything in Storybook. And something that it's good for stakeholders and also you, it's not given for free, but it's again just the one plugin that allow you to embed Figma files directly into Storybook. So you don't have to go back and forth when you are viewing your components, and it's good for stakeholders. You don't have to open Figma. Everything is in sync with Figma in the Storybook. So here I have my small Figma, the medium, and the large again. And so I've been talking about how I like to give static stories, but also at the end, I like to give what I call the sandbox. And the sandbox, if we go to the control, this is where we see all the properties and where your stakeholders can play with them, mix different properties. So if I want, instead of click me, I can right click here and I can see how the component is behaving depending on what we put inside, or we can toggle the disabled, we can toggle the is loading, we can toggle the kinds, different sizes, the shapes, and everything that we want. And yeah, I believe for the final result, that's everything. And now moving to how we build that. So I'm a big fan of Vim. So sorry, sorry, not sorry. So when you install Storybook, this is the repository that will be created. So this Storybook folder, and the file, one file that is important is this main.js file, where you specify where Storybook has to go to find your stories. So the different previews that we've seen on Storybook, the different add-ons that you might be using. So you have already some of them that are built in, but for example, the Storybook add-on design for importing Figma files directly into Storybook, that's an add-on that you have to add later. Also, you have the preview. So I'm using a style component for this demo. So I got to, on Storybook, I have to do a couple of work for style component to work in Storybook, pretty same as what you will do in your website. So setting the global style and so on. This is where also, this is not given for free on Storybook when you initialize it, but the custom viewport that we saw, it's very easy to extend them and add what you want. Here I got a list that I like to work with. So different devices, different sizes, and you can add your own. And here, this is where I sort on the file structure. This is where you can sort how your story will appear. So for the design tokens that we talk about, so usually those are part, if you use something like a style component, this is where you will, this is the theme of your library. So anything like breakpoints, colors, elevations, they are part of your theme. So if I'm going to my theme here, and that one, so this is where I'm putting all the design tokens, so my breakpoints, my colors, then I inject it with style component as my theme. And I like to put the stories inside the Storybook folder. Moving to something more interesting here, so the buttons again. So here I'm using TypeScript. So if you guys know, in TypeScript you have to provide the types of your components. So here you can see all the different props that the button might have. So an optional boolean, an optional kind, with the different kinds that are accessible here. So I'm using style components, so I have the different style, the different function that takes as input the kinds and generate the specific CSS based on the kind, based on the size. So if it's a small size, you have this CSS. If it's medium, we have that CSS. Same for the shape, and then you have the root style. So the default style that is shared by all the buttons, whatever the size, whatever the kind. So moving to the button. So the button is not a complicated component. It's just a normal button, but you have some extra props like the kind, and something that might be interesting here is this is loading. So if the prop is loading is true, I show this is loading text, but you might add a spinner or everything you want. And if it's not loading, then I'm displaying the actual content of my button. And something related to Storybook, so the story. So here I got my common props, and every story file should have this default export with the title of your component, which component you are referring to, the common props that we are sharing. This is where I'm specifying with the Figma plugin how to find the different Figma URLs to sync with the Storybook preview. And here I just have arrays of my different kinds where I can loop through in my static stories. So the primary loop through the shape. So for every shape, every size, I create a button component. Same for the secondary kind, the ghost kind, the loading, the disabled. And here, this is where I'm providing the sandbox that we show, that you've seen in the bottom of every component. So you first create a template that you bind to different args, and Storybook understand that the args that you put here are the args that you want to play with, and you export every stories, and you are good to go. One more that we can show is this page. So on the page here, I mock the possible result. So, and I feed this result to every possibilities. So the square, the rounded, and so on. And yes, pretty much it for the implementation. Yep. So going back to the slides. Take my mic. So some best practices and tips for the implementation. So what I like to do is providing static and sandbox stories. You might use a different approach. It's fine. Document your storybook as much as possible, adding comment, adding README for each component and how to use them. Test accessibilities right into your stories, what we've seen with the accessibility plugin. Use these storybook add-on designs if you want to import Figma directly into your storybook. It also works for Adobe XD and Sketch, I suppose. So if you know about Storybook and you have looked into other companies' storybooks, you might have seen that the architecture is different and they might not show templates and pages, because when moving to templates, sometimes you are kind of crossing the line, and this is where you might add business logics, and we don't want that into Storybook. So I wanted to show you that in this case, it's a very simple example. So it's I wanted to show that we can do it, but it might not make sense for every project. And involve the stakeholders in your development process, again, in the beginning, but throughout the whole process. Okay. So now that we've we implemented the storybook, it's time for the deployment. So we have here 3 choices that I represented. Chromatic, which is made by the same team as Storybook, GitHub Pages, AWS 3, and a lot more alternatives, because at the end of the day, when you build a Storybook, it's just creating a static website, so everything that can host static website will work. In this case, we will use Chromatic. The reason why we will use it is because it's very easy to set up. It allows you to have public and private storybooks fairly easy. You will have all your storybooks in one place. They have a very nice Git style review and merge for your UI components. It's very good for collaboration, and it allows you to have a regression testing in it. So in order to deploy, it's very easy. So one thing you have to do is you have to install the dev dependency, so the Chromatic dev dependency. Then when you create your account into the Chromatic website, they will give you your project token, and then you can very easily deploy using the npx chromatic-project token with the project token that has been given. And when that's done, we can view a demo on what the dashboard on Chromatics looks like. So here, another 1 second. Okay, so I'm in the Chromative project, so TK Creative Kit. I have 2 builds, but we will not care about the build number 2 because it was just me adding fixing the README, so there is no component modification, so we don't care about that. Moving to the build 1, so the first build, the first deployment, this is where I'm seeing all the different stories that have been published. So we can see here the breakpoints. You can also, so when I said that it's very good for collaboration, is because you can add comments at very specific point in your design and allow your collaborators to communicate about what's possible changes or possible errors. So here, moving to something that we care is the library. So this is where we find all our components. So moving to the atoms, we find what we just presented in the localhost. And if we move to view stories, so here it's opening the exact same storybook that we had in localhost, but now you have it online, so you can share it with your collaborators or with the world, if you like. And one thing that I want to show, because when you first try Chromatic, you might think why I cannot access, or why my teammates cannot access the storybook. It is because by default storybook are private. So if you wanna share them, if you wanna share your storybooks with the world, don't forget to toggle this private to public. And moving back to the slides. So that was the last demo. So now I can keep the mic. Best practices and tips related to deploying on Chromatic. So again, storybooks are private by default. So if you want to keep them close to your collaborators, that's fine. But if you want to share them to everyone, which is the case in here, in this presentation, don't forget to toggle them and set them to public. You have 5,000 free snapshots per month. So if you need more, everything is free, but if you need more than 5,000 free snapshots, then you will move to the paid plan. I recommend you to sync in your account, sync it with your GitHub account, so you have both Chromatic and your GitHub repo synced together, which is nice. And so I've said that in order to deploy, we use Chromatic, npx Chromatic with the project token, but in real situation, deploying to Chromatic will be part of your continuous integration pipeline. So for example, anytime you push or you merge to master, you merge a peer to master, it will automatically deploy your changes to Chromatic. Okay. So now that we deployed the Storybook, it's time for publishing your component library. So first we have to choose, do we want a public or a private library? In our case, I wanted to share it with everyone possible, so I've decided to have a public one using rollup.js. Oh, I'm always out of sync with the slide. So I'm using rollup.js, which is a JavaScript bundler specialized for building libraries. There are others out there, and we will be publishing to the Node package manager. So in order for rollup to transpile our TypeScript code into JavaScript, you need this rollup config, and here I'm setting the input as src the index, because this is where I'm re-exporting all. Okay. This is where I'm re-exporting all my component. So you point to the index.ts. Then I specify that as output, I want two kind of format, the CommonJS format and the ES module. And in the plugin, so because I'm using TypeScript, I'm using the TypeScript plugin with the path to my tsconfig.build.json. I want the types, and I'm also specifying that the type directory is the same directory, the this directory. And the last piece, the last array here, the external array, here I have React and style component. The reason is when you build a library, you have peer dependencies, and in my case, React and style component are peer dependencies. What it means is, like, I don't want to bundle those dependencies with the library. It is the role of the consumer to import React and style component, because you don't want twice the same in potential conflict. And when you got that, simply run rollup-c, rollup specifying the config file with the TypeScript plugin. And when you got that, you can just, because we are publishing a public library, you just, in the command, you just log into npm and run npm publish. And here we go, everything is online and ready to be installed by everyone wishing to. So best practices and tips regarding publishing the library. First question is, should you really publish your component libraries? There is other ways. If yes, do you want a public library or a private one? Do you want this to be shared with everyone, like we are doing now, or do you want it to be close to your organization? So in that case, it will be a private component library. I recommend you to use TypeScript. It's good for developer experience, and it's good for your consumers because you also provide types. Or you can also use JavaScript and provide the types separately. But there is so many more advantages to use TypeScript that I will not recommend it enough. Document your library, nice README, nice testing, nice code coverage, and use a changelog to track the changes and show to your consumer if you have a new version, will it break something that they have? Are they impacted or not? And now that the library has been published, it's time for the integration. So very quickly here, for integrating, it's not difficult. Just with npm install the name of your component library, of your library. And also we said that style component was a pure dependency, so if it wasn't installed before, don't forget to install style component. I assume that React was installed already. Same for Yarn, and here you have a quick screenshot if you want to integrate the button that we just implemented. But if you want the full integration, you can see there is another repo. Everything is open source and given for future studies. You can visit and check everything. Best practices and tips, there is actually just one for this section. I recommend you to use npm link with the name of the library or the npm install with the local path when you test the integration, so you don't have to, just for testing purposes, push to npm, pull install from npm. You can do save a lot of time and don't have, if you release, if you create multiple release, alpha and 0.1, 0.2 just for testing, it's not good. So final key takeaways. So this is for every designers, every developers. Study the human interface guidelines. For the web, for Apple platforms and Android, it will make you a better designer and a better developer, and both if you are part of the so-called developer unicorns out there. Onboard and communicate with the stakeholders early on. So I said it again and again, but this is, if you have to take one thing of this talk, is communicate with your peers. The storybook is a living document, so the one that we've been doing today is fairly small, and you have a lot more out there, but you have to start somewhere. So start with a button, a batch component, and the more time pass, the bigger it will get. So if you didn't get it for now, the goal of this talk is for you to use Storybook. It will pay dividend. It's a little bit more work in the beginning, but I suppose here we are serious developers. So for serious project and project that you will be building for the following years, this is something that will be paying dividends. And if you already have a project, it's not a problem. You can gradually implement Storybook, adopt it, starting with the buttons and covering all your components at some point. And study top company storybooks. The one that we've been doing today is fairly simple, and outside there are a lot of big companies using Storybook and providing their Storybook online for the public to see, and same for the component library. And as always, get your hands dirty. It's not that complicated. You have to start small, one button again, and move to covering all your components. So to learn more here, we have the link of everything that is provided to you for future. That might be a lot. So when you come back home, eat a lot, sleep well, and tomorrow you can check this in your own time. So the Figma file, the component library, the Storybook repo, the slides are also available. The Storybook preview, the link is here. The NPM package, you can install it. If you want to make more component, PRs are welcome. You also have the integration repo. I'm also showing, providing links to more inspirations. So you have SAP, you can check their Storybook, which is massive. Microsoft as well, IBM Carbon, Uber-based. They are not using Storybook, but their component library is awesome. Link again to the atomic design methodology. If you want to use this approach, even as a developer, check what is it about and understand. So you might you will be able to speak with your designer better. And Storybook is not the only one. You have alternatives like Pattern Lab, React Cosmos, Lado, but Storybook is the most popular one. And something that I already been doing this talk once, and I remember that we were talking that the best advice that I could give to any developer and designer is, if you are a designer, try to code something. So you are good at making the design, but by implementing your design, you will understand that development is not easy, and it will make you think a lot about your design and how you can make it better and make better communication with the developers. And if you are the developers, you should care about design as well. So you are good at development, but try to create a design, and you will see that here again, it's not that easy as it looks. It's not just dragging and dropping some rectangles. That's not it. So by doing this, you will be able to talk to your peers, stay humble, and realize that both jobs are hard, and see both sides. Problem with most companies is you have a wall between design and development, and try to this is why people that can do both, bit of design, bit of development, they are very valuable for a company, because they allow to break that wall and to make better product for your users. And yeah, that's an extra slide, because Storybook 7 is in beta now. So in this demo, we are not using Storybook 7, but it has been released, and they are providing a revamped interface, so a new interface, better performance, so 2 times faster than the last version. Finally, we will have strongly typed stories. It will also support the MDX version 2, and you will have support for Vite, Next.js, and Svelte. So we are done. So I thank you very much, and fire up the questions. Do we wait? Yeah, 1 second. Can I stop the recording, or do we record the questions as well? Yeah.